afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our guest lecture series, Research, Reflection and Practices, guest lecture 21. This is a series of lectures that we do monthly, and we invite a very special resource person. So today we have Mr. Channa Fernando-Pulle, Group Head from Adfactor AI. Welcome, Channa. So, just to give a little introduction about Channa, he specializes in strategic public relations, advocacy campaigns, and his expertise is in the field of apparels, transportation, manufacturing, tech, and AI. And previously, he worked in this area of ERP solutions and financial services. His professional background is he has been a legal intern at Awareness, then Daily Mirror and Daily FT Business as a business journalist, and a communicative executive at Attune, and an assistant manager corporate communication at Entrust Limited. His academic qualifications are he has an LLB from the University of London and a diploma in international relations at the Pandana Center for International Studies. So he has a very big background on journalism and public policy. So I welcome you once again, Mr. Fernando-Pulle, to take us through this very interesting topic of future-proofing policy, artificial intelligence, innovation, and strategic communication, which is more related and focused to the researchers, I believe. Try to make it so that it will fit in with whatever we are doing. Okay. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I hope I'm audible and visible. So today's discussion, I tried as much as possible to make this, as Dr. Indika said, relevant for people engaged in research policy. As she said, I come from a communications journalism background, so I think I'll be starting from, I'll be giving my perspective on these things, but then I'll also try to showcase a few use cases that I have worked on, as well as just, a few options that I researched for what could be relevant from these systems for researchers and for people working in your space. So a few quick questions before we begin. Would be, has anybody in the room or online used any of these systems in the past? Are you familiar with AI in any way? Okay. And like, I'm guessing everybody would have, or like, if you haven't heard of it, I mean, I'm sure everybody must have heard of it by now, but have you experimented with using these systems in any way, or just to understand how familiar you all are with it? Okay, like what were some of the use cases that you found?
ChatGPT,
Yeah.
Perplexity.
Yes.
So
Okay.
basically, I'm using for like checking grammar of the things that
Right.
I find to do my writing. That's basis for that.
Okay, great. Yeah, that is, as somebody who's engaged in a lot of writing work, spell checks, grammar checks, and then I think just trying to come up with more concise ways of phrasing something, or like just a smoother way of writing a sentence or paragraph definitely is one of the top use cases. And then for me, I write a lot of press releases, thought leadership pieces. So even brainstorming on headline ideas and things like that. But definitely, so this is the text to text component of AI, right? So there are multiple kinds of outputs that you can get from these systems. There's text to text, there's text to image, there is now text to video that is coming. It's already there are some pretty amazing examples now of it completely generating these things from scratch, a full working video. And then you also have audio to text, so it can listen to what you're saying and type that out. And on the far-flung side of things, there's even now brain scans that are being used to recreate images of what you're seeing based on how your brain scans. So like there is a lot of like this is a revolution in communications technology akin to the printing press, but on a scale that I don't think anyone can comprehend as yet. This image that you see is one of the first images that, well, I produced this using one of the earlier versions of the image softwares that are now available. So this is on DALL-E 2, which is one of the systems owned by OpenAI. So just a very brief story about this image was that I was trying to explain to my CEO in India how these systems have a lot of potential. And he said, okay, our company was just achieving 25 years in India, and the CEO had written a message to the to his partner in the business, and he asked me if I could convert that message into an image. And so with a lot of tweaking, there was a lot of research into different kinds of art styles and all of that. And eventually this is what came out. And we'll come back to this in a little while. But firstly, what is AI? What is artificial intelligence? I was curious to see whether this would like show up. It's a kind of a hidden portrait, an optical illusion produced by AI, made to look like a human painting. And it's actually the portrait of Mona Lisa hidden in a cityscape. And the closer you look at it, I think you'll see that it's a fully coherent cityscape, but it is also a portrait of Mona Lisa. And like these kinds of images and this kind of, from a creative perspective, there's a lot of opportunities that are opening up. I've seen people use this to try and create hidden images in their QR code so that a QR code no longer looks like just a QR code. So there's a lot of interesting innovations that are happening. But the technical definition of what is artificial intelligence, it refers to the simulation of human intelligence in machines that are programmed to think and learn. AI systems can perform tasks that typically require human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, decision-making, and language translation. Now, this is, I did this to make it seem kind of daunting on purpose. This is some of the jargon that gets thrown around a lot when people talk about what is AI. So they'll talk about machine learning, they'll talk about LLMs, large language models, they'll talk about natural language processing, they'll talk about artificial neural networks. And then the most famous one in this set of terms that even I struggle to remember what it stands for is GPT, Generative Pre-trained Transformers. And then the holy grail of AI is something that we are yet to see is AGI, which is Artificial General Intelligence. So all of the systems that we see right now are called narrow AIs. They're limited to very specific tasks and functions. But the idea over time is that we will move to a position where these AIs can be more specialized in a general variety of ways. It can function without really any human intervention and can generate novel ideas. It can, like at the moment, these things can't do complicated math problems, for example, but eventually they'll get to that point. And like, there's lots of theories about at what point we will cross this threshold and all that. And the image that you see there is kind of a visual representation of artificial neural networks, which is, these are systems that are essentially modeled on the human mind and the human brain. They're like, it's meant to represent like individual synapses in neurons and like how they connect to each other. It's all fascinating and extremely complicated, but do you need to understand how it works to use it? It definitely helps to understand what these things are doing, because they're not thinking in the way that a human mind thinks. But there is a high level of information processing capabilities, novel ideas that can come out of these systems. And you don't need to understand the nuts and bolts of how it works. But I think if you do start to research how these things function, you will start to understand what the limitations of the systems are, what you can use it for, what you can't rely on it for. Um, so I thought it would be best to start with let you all know where I'm coming from with these systems. So that image I showed you earlier was one. Okay. The image I showed you earlier eventually was what got printed up and hung in our Indian office. So this was like a point of personal pride because it went from an idea in my head to being something physical in the real world. And the left side is also just the image that I had generated for a previous presentation that I'd done, which I just thought was really cool. But for me, science fiction science fiction is a big reason why I became interested in these subjects in the first place. And I think what we're seeing with artificial intelligence more recently is that science fiction is starting to come closer and closer to being reality. So I just went and did a quick bit of research on how science fiction tends to presage, predict actual technological innovations. 1865, Jules Verne predicted that people would go into space, that there would be weightlessness, and that these would launch from, they would be launching spaceships from Florida in 1865. Then atomic bombs in 1914 were predicted by H.G. Wells with like stunning precision. The Sentinel, Arthur C. Clarke, Sri Lanka's adopted son, he predicted global satellite networks. 1984 predicted massive surveillance and facial recognition technologies. 1950, this is not science fiction, but Alan Turing proposes the Turing test for machine intelligence, which is still like a basic concept that is now currently being evaluated, which is like, at what point do these machines pass for human intelligence? And that has been one of the tests that is run on GPT from GPT-1 onwards. Foundations by Isaac Asimov is a personal favorite of mine, where there is a person who creates an entire discipline called psychohistory, which is basically presaging big data analytics and predictive modeling in the social sciences. There was, in 1956 was the first official term artificial intelligence was created. And then in 1966, Star Trek showed universal translators, voice-activated computers, and handheld communication devices. 1968, 2001 A Space Odyssey shows an AI assistant with natural language processing. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is one of my personal favorites, which we'll get into a bit later. And then in 1990, Neuromancer by William Gibson predicted global computer networks and the internet in 1984. And then in 1989, Hyperion is another more obscure one that shows people recreating the poet John Keats as an AI. And you're seeing these things actually happen today now. So the speed of progress in actual computer and AI development accelerated rapidly, where you had Garry Kasparov was defeated in chess by a computer system, IBM's Deep Blue, in 97. By 2015, DeepMind's AlphaGo defeats the world champion Go player and has only progressed. It is now it can't be beaten by humans anymore. And then in 2020, OpenAI releases GPT-3, showcasing advanced understanding and language generation. So 2020 was around the time that I started getting interested in this subject personally as well. There was one podcast that I would listen to, which has a lot of people from MIT and all of these other people who are leaders in the AI space, where they come and talk for 2-3 hours, a podcast called Lex Friedman. And from him and that podcast, I learned about GPTs very loosely. And so I was aware of what was happening with these systems by 2022 when ChatGPT launched. Like I immediately got on it, and the image that I showed you that I had put together, that was done in November 2022. Since then, those systems have radically increased in quality. And 2024, I just put down 2 little benchmarks. One is AlphaFold 3 from Google's DeepMind, it's something that's used to predict all possible foldings of proteins. This is something that's going to be it'll allow us to create new kinds of molecules. It has implications for medicine, chemistry, construction, everything. And then there's also the first deployments of lethal autonomous AI. You have people strapping AI into robots and attaching guns onto those robots, and they're autonomously moving around. They're not controlled by a human. So this is what you're seeing in Russia and Ukraine at the moment with drone war, is going to most likely escalate into this kind of warfare. And at the moment, this is why there's a lot of concern about the speed at which this develops, who gets the advantage. It's a very fascinating space and it's changing very quickly. So the idea of trying to put a neat loop around what's happening in AI is always impossible to do, but I tried to do my best here. So I'll just take you all now through a few quick use cases, stuff that I've been working on the fly and trying to develop as part of my work. So this one is, there was a World Population Net or something like that, an organization that tracks brain drain globally. I was asked to do an article in the HR space talking about how brain drain is impacting the Sri Lankan economy. I thought it would be interesting to compare how Sri Lanka is performing on brain drain relative to regional players and relative to the worst countries for brain drain in the world. And I also compared against the best countries, and Sri Lanka is definitely up there. Samoa is one of the worst countries in the world. But this data was unsorted. I downloaded a CSV file from this website, and I'm terrible at Excel. My core competency is Microsoft Word. I wasn't sure how to make this work. So I fed all of this data into, and I downloaded it, fed it into the machine, and then I started asking it questions. Okay, where does Sri Lanka rank? Where does everyone else rank in SAARC? Then I asked it to produce a graph, and it produced this graph. Then I was like, okay, this graph is ugly. There were different variations of it. The order of it was not right. Sri Lanka was put in the middle. I wanted it to be separate so you can compare it more easily. The color schemes were wrong. I wanted to compare outside of SAARC. There's this infinite permutations. You can ask it all of these questions, ask it to generate the graph, and it does it. All of that took a few hours instead of taking a lot longer. Naturally, since we had to take this article to print, you can't trust anything that this thing tells you. It's you have to check every step of its work. So I went back through the files, then checked each of these, and it all added up in the end. So that's one of the use cases, which I hope might be something that might inspire some ideas for you all as well. This was another one. So the budget proposals that come out every year, there's a long, lengthy, boring speech from the president where he lists off in no particular order a bunch of priorities that he has, and allocations that are made under each. Everybody must be familiar with. Naturally, the budget is not a good indicator of how government spending is actually going to be performed, but it's an indicator. So for one of my clients, in the banking sector, he didn't ask me for this. Proactively, the budget speech ended, I can't remember what time, it was fairly late. By about 10 p.m. in the night on the day that the budget speech was given, I downloaded the English speech because my signal is not that great. So downloaded the English one, fed it into ChatGPT section by section because it was too long to put the entire thing in at once. And then I asked it, okay, let's go section by section and tell me what the proposal is that you're talking about. Give me the direct quote from the budget speech. Give me a summary of what that means and what it's going to mean for the banking sector and what is the potential impact for the economy at large. And was just a very basic experiment with this whole thing. But out of this, I got a long list of, like, every proposal was analyzed. Some were relevant, some were not. Some I thought the analysis was very weak, but it still created a framework that I could then correct, as opposed to going one by one, reading each proposal, trying to understand each of these. And so it basically by 2 in the morning that day, I had a full analysis ready and I emailed it to my client and they were thrilled about it. They went through it in some detail, refined it a bit, and then submitted that to their board of directors, saying, here's what we see as what's going to impact the banking sector. And everybody was very happy. And that was, like, companies like Deloitte and KPMG make their business out of hosting these major budget forums where everybody talks, in painstaking detail about just this kind of stuff. I've covered these stories as a journalist. So this is essentially automating that entire level of analysis. You still have to go through everything, but like you now have like a broad overview of this. So yeah, analysis of the insurance industry. So I also take on freelance work from time to time, and in one of them I was asked to do a analysis for an annual report of an insurance company, look at the industry highlights and pick out the specific things that they need to report for the annual report. So they just needed a few metrics, but unfortunately for the entire insurance industry, there was no annual report out. But there are 4 quarters of information like processed like this. So I can sit and go through each one by one, add up the 4 quarters, and then go through that painstaking process, which I had to do anyway because I had to check. But I also got it to I uploaded all 4 quarters data and told it, okay, find the gross written premium, find the cost claims, find the profit before tax across the entire industry, across all 4 quarters, and it was accurate. Like I checked, and it didn't even need correcting. And this was on an older system, ChatGPT 4. Now there's 4.0 that's out, and it just keeps advancing. There's questions as to whether it's going to keep advancing at this speed, but it's getting better at this. So these are just some very basic case studies from my experience with it. There is also, so some of the other things that I use it for, and summarizing large groups of news stories. So in my line of work, for each of my clients, there's a WhatsApp group, and each of those WhatsApp groups is getting flooded with news stories about each of these clients or their industry. And so there'll be, in the plantation sector, a good 20 different stories at any given time. I generally don't have the time to go through in full detail first thing in the morning. So I take all 20 stories, feed it into ChatGPT, and ask it for a summary. And I'll tell it I'm looking for any information that's going to reflect controversially on my clients, anything that's going to potentially impact them, and then it gives me a list. It also does translations. Sometimes it does them well, sometimes it's awful. And this gets into one of the issues with these systems. And then audio transcription is another really powerful use case. I have the paid version of ChatGPT. So people look at me strange in the office now because I'm having conversations with it on a regular basis. So I also took the liberty of asking it what use cases would be most relevant for SEPA after uploading some information about SEPA from the annual report. And this is what it suggested. So social media sentiment analysis, gauging public opinion on poverty-related issues or policy implementations. Governance and fraud detection in aid distribution, using machine learning to identify potential misuse of poverty alleviation funds. Personalized education and skill development recommendations. I can go on like this. There's automated survey analysis, economic impact simulations, early warning systems for economic crisis, predictive models for climate change impacts and how that's going to impact poverty, health resource optimization. There's more predictive modeling for poverty trends, dynamic poverty mapping that includes satellite data, chatbots for public information dissemination in multiple languages, AI-assisted grant writing and proposal development, AI-assisted stakeholder network analysis, natural language processing for policy analysis, so and automated policy impact assessments, and yeah, satellite images for like benefiting agriculture as well. So these are just, and this was just the top line suggestions that it gave me. I didn't like I could have gotten better responses out of it if I had taken more time to upload more data into it. There's a famous computer term, programming term called garbage in, garbage out. If you give it bad information and if you ask it the wrong things, it's going to give you terrible results. But if you spend some time thinking about how you structure the information that you're giving it, and you treat it like a conversation with a very hardworking but sometimes completely incompetent colleague, like you will see that it, like if you give it the right track, you can get some reasonable output out, and then you have to check every line that it gives you. You cannot rely on any of it. Limitations and concerns. So I talked a little bit about AI augmented warfare. I mean, in Israel, Palestine, they were using some of this already for targeting, and it's a controversial subject, but I have thoughts on it. But reliability, hype, and the danger of hallucinations. So can you rely on the outputs that ChatGPT is giving you? If you ask it to run a calculation, can you rely on that calculation? And then there's also a term called hallucinations, which is sometimes it just spits out nonsense. And there's no predicting when that's going to happen, whether you can. So you really have to check whatever it says. There's also the question of bias and the risk of AI-driven narrowing of the Overton window. That's a bit of a mouthful, but bias meaning that all of these systems, like if you ask, I think there's a famous one where people asked it to show what a doctor looks like, and there were no women and there were no brown people in the images that it created. So there's inherent biases from the information that is on the internet that will then get carried into these systems, and then as people rely on it without really questioning it, you're going to see the scope of reasonable discourse starts to shrink, because people are just relying on the systems. The systems are feeding itself information. So it's creating these feedback loops where eventually the AI is dictating what communication is. So it's a possibility, over-reliance and degradation of human skill, knowledge, and experience. So for me, even spell check in Microsoft Word, I feel has eroded my internal spell check, because there are words like entrepreneur, which I spelled over and over again, but I still manage to mess it up, and then I go to spell. I know the spell check will catch it, and then I'll use spell check to fix it. So I've forgotten how to spell that word properly, and like that, you're going I at least have the experience of about 10 plus years of writing without any assistance, and just based on what I could think of. So that experience means that I can spot quality writing. I can spot what's good, what's not good. I have this, I can't explain why even, but inherently I know. But as new kids join the workforce, they're going to face this issue where they're going to have this fast track to all of this knowledge and information, and they're not going to have that inherent sense of quality check. And how is that going to play out? It depends. And then so in one of those science fiction books I was talking about, Foundation, it gets into this where it talks about What happens when people start just listening to experts and saying like, oh, this expert said it, therefore that must be the truth, instead of actually understanding the first principles of a thing, understanding, the details of it. Pervasive misinformation is hasn't kicked off yet, but we're likely to get flooded with so much of information created by these systems that it's going to be really hard to tell what's real, what's not in the news. I mean, even before we had all of these systems in place, there were in Sri Lanka so many instances of communal violence caused by fake stories, fake news. And that was before people have the option of amplifying it through these systems in all three languages and posting it infinitely. So like that's going to be a challenge. Cybersecurity fraud and scams is going to be a major problem moving forward. There are lots of scams already created where people steal the voice of your loved one and then make a phone call to you pretending like they're in trouble and asking you to send them money. Ethics and intellectual property. OpenAI, one of the leaders in this space, is rife with examples of this, where they, without permission, use recreated an actress's voice, Scarlett Johansson's voice, for their voice chat for ChatGPT. They didn't record anything from her. They just used her movies and pulled her voice and recreated it. And that's the leader in this space that's acting like that. So like what it's going to mean, there's I think all of the major music companies right now are suing two AI companies that created music. So you can like I messed around with it as well. I asked it to create a show tunes musical summary of the movie Dune by Frank Herbert, and it made a song with lyrics, everything. There's climate change issues in AI. Each of these computers that they're using, the computer chips, the amount of compute energy that needs to go into each of the advancements that you see it's pulling more and more energy. Google's carbon footprint has radically increased over the past year, purely driven by the fact that they are chasing AI this hard. And there are multiple players in the world doing it, and they all require more and more energy. So definitely there's climate change implications to that. And I think for SEPA, one thing to think about is how job losses and an exacerbation of wealth inequality, because with every technological revolution, industrial revolution that you see, there is a concentration of wealth. And with that, there is a disenfranchisement of more people as they lose jobs. Like already, Tesla is trying to use its robots to replace labor in the US. So many of our citizens are leaving our country to go work in these minimum wage jobs in the US, in the UK, and all these places, and they're doing that because their labor is paid higher than here. But if you can build a robot that can work without taking any breaks, will not unionize, like does not need food, does not need sleep, does not need anything, just energy, like would you hire a human? And like what is going to happen to the immigrants in those countries in that case? And like will they be forced to come back here? How will we receive them? How will we train them? How will we find roles for them in society? And yeah, the AI augmented warfare, I think we've all watched the movie Terminator. This was another concern of mine. The president of our country proposed 1 billion rupees to study the relationship between Buddhism and artificial intelligence. Me with my $25 ChatGPT subscription asked it, and it gave me, like I've just given you a small thing. It listed out all of the, impermanence and all of the other things. So like, are we prioritizing how we're going to integrate these things properly? Like we don't need to know about that relationship not for 1 billion rupees. Maybe it'd be fascinating to know, but not for $1 billion. I can do it for $25. Potential opportunities. So of course, economic growth, increased efficiency, cost savings, productivity gains, robotics, smart manufacturing, new kinds of jobs that get created as a result. You can be an AI technician. You can be a robot technician. Then improved diagnostics is a fascinating one. Already these systems can scan and screen for cancer and other diseases much better than human can. We've, yeah, uh, there's a lot of little applications here I listed out, and unfortunately the formatting has gotten messed up, but like predictive analytics for in the agriculture sector is something that is going to be very powerful. We have a shortage of doctors, but then these systems can be used to give at least basic consultation at a fraction of the cost. Then inclusive education, personalized education. You can create curriculums for students that are personalized to each student and are updated based on their own, testing. Vocational training, smart cities, like better energy utilization, better water, there's so many ways that this could be harnessed. Climate change, climate monitoring, yeah, plenty of applications there. I think I missed the slide talking about popular AI systems, but before I get there, I wanted to end with this, which is Douglas Adams and the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. In that story, they build a computer called Deep Thought, and they ask Deep Thought this question: what is the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything? And Deep Thought, after 7.5 million years it takes to compute, it comes out with the answer everybody's waiting, and the answer it gives is 42. And it basically what Deep Thought says after that is like, you asked me a meaningless question, so you got a meaningless answer. And you have to first think about what is the ultimate question in order to get to what is the ultimate answer. So like Deep Thought has given a meaningless answer, and we're now recognizing that raw computational power alone isn't enough. Interpretation and asking right questions with these systems is more important even. There is also a story that goes that 42 was a quote that the author put in there saying that it basically means anything. So it is what you make of it is what the answer to life is, but that's a whole other thing. Thank you. And I just want to see if I've accidentally dropped out that slide. Yeah, sorry. I had a slide here. It's gone missing on like popular AI systems. I'll just walk you all through the ones that I'm using at the moment. So of course, ChatGPT 4o is the main one that I'm on at the moment. But very recently, there's another one called Claude 3.5 Sonnet. That is also, it's free to use, but it has a limitation on how much, and it doesn't do text to image, but it's text to text, and like its analysis capabilities, its coding capabilities are phenomenal. Like it's the best out there. So you should take a look at Claude as well. Perplexity is the other one that I use on a regular basis to kind of give me a high level Google search of any given issue, any given subject. I use Perplexity. I think I'd also talked about so some of the artwork that I've created, like this one here, is based on DALL-E 3, I think, and that comes out of the ChatGPT subscription. Yeah, so I think that is my presentation. Would be curious to know if you have any questions, any thoughts, and yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you.
Today, coming today, spending valuable time here.